says that he was his father's favorite. So much as that his father bought him a special gift, which was a coat of many colors. His father sent him to check on his brothers while they were working, and so the brothers plotted as he was coming up toward them that they were sick and tired of Joseph, and so they threw him in a pit. My NLT version calls it a cistern, but it's an empty hole in the ground. And so it would be used to maybe catch water in it and hold water for a long time, something that they could draw up like a well, but it would not be an actual source of water. So they throw him in this pit, and then they sell him for 20 pieces of silver to some traders that are riding by. As he is in that house, he rises up to a leadership role where he is tempted by the wife, which we talked about a few weeks ago. And because he will not fall into sin with the wife, she slanders his name, and he is imprisoned. He's put in prison with a couple of guys that have their own situation happening, but later on he is finally taken out of prison, and he rises up to a leading spot in Pharaoh's household. Okay? So much as Pharaoh just kind of steps back and lets Joseph lead in this area, and he doesn't even have to worry about it. So all of these things are very important, and we're going to come back to those in a little bit and kind of see some parallel that happens in Scripture. But we're going to first start in Genesis chapter 45 today. And it says this. It says, Joseph could stand it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out, all of you." So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. "I am Joseph," he said to his brothers. "Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. "Please come closer," he said to them. So they came closer, and he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset, and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. This famine that has ravaged the land for 2 years will last 5 more years, and there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive, and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace, and the governor of all of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master over all the land of Egypt. So come down to me immediately. You can live here in the region of Goshen, where you can be near me with all your children and grandchildren, flocks, herds, everything you own. I will take care of you here, for there is still 5 years of famine ahead of us. Otherwise, you and your household and all your animals will starve." So the brothers leave, and they do what Joseph says, and they go back and they tell the dad, "You're not going to believe this, but Joseph is alive." And the dad also responds in the same way. He's shocked, but he believes, and he is ready to go see his son Joseph. The last few weeks we have gone in great detail about Joseph's trials. Like, he has just absolutely had the worst luck ever, right? Like, he's had some of the worst things happen to him. And this has not been a little tiny time period. This is all the way from when he's 17 to 30. So we're talking 13 years of torture and torment and all of this stuff that he has had to deal through. This is a long, long time period. And all of it because, in my eyes, maybe most readers' eyes, because of the brothers. The brothers did him dirty, like horrible. And they threw him away in the trash. And they sold him off, and they just wanted rid of him. And so whenever I read this story, I look at this and I just think, how would I have reacted if the same thing had happened to me? I just don't believe that I would be as forgiving as Joseph, right? Like, if I had somebody do me that dirty, then I would think that I would want them to know how much they wronged me. I would probably go on and on about it to make sure that they understood that they wronged me and I didn't like it. I'd want to explain my innocence. I would want to make sure that they understood that, why would you do this to me? I didn't do anything wrong, but you did this to me. I would want them to know they were guilty. I would want justice. I would want them to have to maybe like suffer a little bit. Like I would, 13 years, and they come back to him and he's just like, guys, don't be mad at yourself. Because this actually wasn't your doing, this was God's doing. And I look at this story and I just think maybe it seems a little absurd. Like, if we were done that wrong for that long, we would be so upset, right? Like, we would just be so frustrated. It would be so hard. I have gotten furious over way less, right? Like, we can look at our life and our situations and how life has dealt us different things, and we can probably remember times in our life when we were just outright frustrated, right? Like, there was no other way to feel but just angry and mad of how could this have happened. And Joseph, he treats it as if, like, don't worry, this is not on you. This is actually God's doing. And I just don't know that I could do that because of my reactions to way smaller things that have happened in my life. And so I struggle with that area in my life. When we were in Rome, we had this opportunity to go into what's called the catacombs. Catacombs are deep, dark caves that have been dug in dirt and stone. And in Rome alone, there are 400 miles of caves. Grasp that. It's 400 miles of caves. That is from here to Springfield, to back. This is a massive amount of cave system that's built underneath the ground. We were following this tour guide, and honestly, he was walking a little fast for me. And I told Tanner, I'm like, let's get at the very end of the line so we don't lose anybody, because the guy says right before we go in, make sure you keep up. We know the caves, and if we get lost, we can get out, but you don't. And that was a little bit horrifying whenever you're in charge of a lot of people. And so I was like, Tanner, we're going at the end. We're going to make sure everybody follows through. And so just bobbing and weaving all through these caves. And as you're walking, you can see tunnel after tunnel after tunnel, and it just disappears into deep darkness. And people work back there. They dig back there. They've actually removed all bones or anything. It's all been moved back to secure places so that stuff doesn't get messed with or disrespected. But you can just tell, and it's really eerie and it's really creepy that it's just deep, dark holes. And after the guy says, there are 400 miles of caves around here, you just think, holy mackerel. That really goes a long ways, and I am not getting lost. Okay? And so it was very intentional to stay up. I read something yesterday that I thought was so interesting and I had never heard before. There is actually a spot that they believe that Jesus was kept the night that he was arrested. And whenever I had never even considered it or even thought about it. There's no proof of it. It just is interesting to me. It says in Scripture in Matthew 26 that he gets arrested in the garden, okay? And he goes to Caiaphas for questioning. And then Caiaphas basically says, what do you want to do with him? And the sentence is made by his own fellow peers. And then it says, the next scripture in Matthew, that it notes about Jesus again, it says early the next morning. So the question is, if he was brought in to Caiaphas at nighttime, okay, from the garden praying after dinner, and he is then, the story continues early the next morning. What did they do with Jesus in that little middle ground? Like, where did he stay overnight? The early Christians believed that it was inside this literal pit. It was a 3 by 5 section, 15 square foot. It was dug down taller than the man. I didn't remember what the depth was, but it looked maybe 9, 10 feet deep. And you definitely could not get up out of there, but you accessed this pit by these caves. And when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I have so been in one of these caves. And the caves, the reason why they're 400 miles long is there actually are layers. And as they were excavating, they actually have found some things close to this pit where they feel like it verified that this was definitely Caiaphas's property. So it's so interesting to me that Jesus may have been put in a pit overnight and left there so that they could do with him what they wanted the next morning. In my mind, I'm not sure where I thought Jesus would be overnight. Maybe something that you see on the movies where he's sitting in a jail cell with the iron bars or something like that. But the first Christians believed that this was the spot. And so they have actually built a church over it like the early church did. They built churches over everything to basically claim that space and keep it holy ground, per se. And so when I learned about that, I thought this is interesting. Because I also found out a little while ago, I had never noticed before, the parallel between Joseph's story story and Jesus' story is very similar. And so it's actually believed that Joseph's story is like the prediction to what will happen later in life with Jesus. So let's look back at the list that I had kind of given earlier, and let's see how these stories are so interesting, how they really do line up. First of all, Joseph was his father's favorite. I think we can safely say Jesus is definitely his father's favorite. And then Joseph, while he was doing what his father told him to do, literally, Jacob sent Joseph out to go check on his brothers and to see how they were doing, to see if they were safe. So while he was doing that and taking care of, that's when his brothers get this great idea and throw him in a pit. Well, look at Jesus' story. While he's here on earth, taking care of his brothers and training his brothers, some other people come get him, and they possibly throw him in a pit, but regardless, they did arrest him, and they took him out into captivity to where he was then sold for 30 pieces. So Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver prior to getting in there. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver. It's interesting to me that they make sure that we know that it's silver. Not the same amount of money, but definitely the same kind of money. Then Joseph was put in a crazy, tempting situation. He was put in a horrible situation. He wanted to honor his father, and he did not want to fall into sin. But it said that he was a young, attractive man, and his boss's wife was really attracted to him. And so he could have very easily fallen into sin. So I would imagine that that would be a lot of temptation. And then Jesus, he was tempted in the wilderness by Satan himself. Had temptation on him that was like none other, that we could not even imagine. In every single facet, Jesus had to experience temptation. Neither of them gave in to sin, though. They both stayed strong in the Father, and they did not do it. God was their strength in their temptation, and neither one of them fell. They both were slandered. They both were said that something happened, that they did something wrong, and they did not do something wrong. Joseph was accused of adultery. Jesus was accused of blasphemy. He was accused of everything by them. They both were slandered, and their names were smeared in the mud. They had everything stripped away from them, and they were persecuted. Joseph got thrown into prison and was there for years. He was also put in there with, if you remember, 2 people. And the 2 people were trying to figure out their dreams. And so here he is in the middle of these 2 prisoners trying to figure things out. Jesus is persecuted and hung on a cross. How many people is he stuck in between? 2 people, 2 prisoners. He's hung right there on the cross, and he has a conversation. One of them has no remorse and wants nothing to do with him. The other one is like, Jesus, remember me. The 2 prisoners in Joseph's world, one of them, no remorse, and he gets killed. The other one gets restored, back to work. and eventually remembers Joseph. Isn't that interesting? Two prisoners. One opts out, one opts in. So interesting. They're both punished. They both rise, but in very different ways. Joseph ascends to a high position here on earth, and he becomes the head of the Pharaoh's belongings and his household, and he takes care of everything. But he is like number two. Pharaoh number one, Joseph number two. He was in charge of everything. Jesus ascends to the throne. Not the same at all, but you can see a little bit of a similarity. That he goes from the bottom, treated absolutely horrible, up to now he reigns in heaven on a throne. Joseph was 30. Jesus was 33. But their times were pretty close there together. Both very young men. Both of them were the only way to save their people. Joseph, if God did not remove him from his safe home at a young age and grow him through all of these crazy situations, he would have not been sitting at the right place at the right time to save his family. He was the only reason why his family of outsiders had any right in the world to come into Egypt and live in the best place for as long as they needed and be taken care of. Jesus, on the other hand, is our only hope. He is the only way that we can be brought into the family of God. He's the only way and the only direction that we could possibly go into heaven to join Him. Through Him and Him alone. Isn't this interesting that in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, that was written a few thousand years ago, predicted what we know to be the end of the Bible, the written Word. Isn't it interesting that God had this planned out from the very beginning? I mean, we're talking, this is chapter 20-something whenever he comes in. In the foundations of Christianity, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, what we talked about last week, his family tree, and here is Joseph. And God writes it all out. And even gives like crazy details, like 2 prisoners. One will choose the good path and he will make it. One will not, and he will die. Like, is that not crazy? That parallel that God works out? He is so in the details. How can we think that anything that we go through, any situation that we're in, any circumstance that we are in our lives, how can we even think for a moment that He does not know, that He does not see, and that He will not provide in the way we need provided? If I were Joseph, and I knew all the way down the line that, oh, this is why I went through. Like, if I were a 17-year-old kid and my family sold me into slavery, I would have a really hard time accepting, hey, for the next 13 years they're going to be rough, buddy. Okay? But eventually, on this end, you're going to come out on top and everything's going to be okay. Would we choose that path? I don't know. I don't know that I want the 13 rough years to get to where God is taking me. And I think that's exactly why He does not tell us every step of our life. Like, I would love more than anything to know what God's plan is for me. I would love more than anything to see what He has scheduled for me next. But I truly don't think that I can handle it. And I don't think that you can handle it. And that's why it's called faith. And that's why Joseph's family is remembered in the ultimate hall of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. Because they walked by faith, not by sight. And they are blessed more because of it. If you have a situation in your life that you cannot see why is this like this? Why did this happen to me? Why does this keep happening? Why can I not fix this? God, why are you allowing this? He shows us in the very beginning to the very end of this word that He gives us, our manual, our direction book, that He's got it all worked out. And although we think that we could grasp, if He would just tell us what's next, if He would just explain why I'm going through this, if He would just give me a little glimpse, then I could do it a little better. But the truth is that we just can't. I don't think for a minute that Joseph would have chosen all of that anguish, knowing in the end. But in the end, looking back, he's like, oh, yeah, guys, don't worry. Don't blame yourselves for selling me into slavery. It's not your fault. I was sent to prison for years. It's not your fault of anything that has happened to me. God had it planned out. The older I get, the more I realize how God has been working in my life. I see how He has helped me pivot at key moments in my life, where I feel like I just am going to go down this path and this is the path I choose. And He's like, maybe you should shift. Maybe you should think in a different direction. God has a path set before you. I really do think that. But He's not going to make you walk on it. He's going to let you make your decisions. He's going to let you make your choices. He's going to keep nudging you in. But ultimately, we can't tempt God, right? Like, we can't just say, this is what I'm going to do, and you catch me when I fall, God. Well, no, our decisions have reactions, right? And so that is, if you guys will stand up, I just want to read this ending. If I was sitting there looking at a stack of people who wronged me, I would be pretty frustrated with them. And I'm not sure if I have the strength inside of me to truly forgive. But when I realize this story is running parallel to my story, I have a different opinion. If I were just Joseph sitting there and seeing the brothers, I may want them to have repercussion. I might want them to have justice. I might want them to suffer a little bit. But since I know that I'm the brother that's sitting there in front of Jesus, for real, all of a sudden my mood changes. And I'm like, well, maybe you could give them another chance. Maybe they need 1,000,000 chances. I would think I want justice for them, but I don't want justice for me. I don't want the things that I deserve to happen to me. I want what God had, like I want Him, right? And then forgiveness. It's one of the most difficult things I think humans struggle with. Because when we get hurt, it hurts deep. And when our people get hurt, it even hurts deeper. But as you see of this situation, Joseph's looking at his brothers and he has the opportunity. Guys, he's over everything. He can just cast the brothers out and they're gone. Like he can have anything done to them. But he sits there and he looks at it and he's like, no, no, no. My Father had a bigger purpose here. And although these things happened to me, I see now that I was put here to save you. The exact same thing is happening with Jesus in your life. Jesus was put through the worst of the worst. And he's standing there looking at you, and you're like, man, I know I don't deserve it, but I just really need you to forgive me, Jesus. Like I've blown it again and again and again. Like I'm a slow learner. And Jesus looks at you and he's like, yeah, I will. All you have to do is ask and I got you. Yeah, I went through misery, but I look ahead and I see that God has planned this out. That God had a purpose for His life on earth. And it was all about us. Joseph, his plan was to save his bloodline. God planned it all out for Joseph to be there at the right time and save his people. Jesus, God planned it out from the beginning. That's what's crazy. From the very first book in the Bible to little bitty details. He had it all worked out all along. And Jesus, yeah, He had to go through all of that pain and suffering. But He would tell you it was worth it. And that is amazing to even think of. If you guys will bow your heads.